The dawn of the 20th century brought an era of unyielding optimism to the Caribbean, nowhere more vibrant than in the coastal city of Saint-Pierre. Nestled on the lush tropical island of Martinique, this bustling metropolis was widely celebrated as the Paris of the West Indies. Its streets hummed with commerce, grand theaters hosted lavish performances, and the harbor overflowed with merchant vessels carrying sugar and rum to the far corners of the globe. Yet this magnificent jewel of human achievement was built in the shadow of a sleeping titan. Mount Pelée, a towering volcanic peak, loomed quietly over the red-tiled roofs, its verdant slopes masking a catastrophic power that had been dormant for half a century. The inhabitants of Saint-Pierre viewed the towering summit, not with fear, but with a familiar, almost affectionate complacency. It was simply part of the landscape, a beautiful backdrop to their prosperous lives. But in the spring of 1902, the mountain began to stir, whispering ancient, violent secrets that the modern world was tragically ill-equipped to understand. Deep beneath the earth, magma was rising, building an unimaginable pressure that sought a violent release. The people below, caught up in the rhythm of their daily lives and the fervor of an upcoming political election, remained blissfully unaware that their beloved city was rapidly becoming a monumental tomb. The first subtle omens of the horrifying fate awaiting them manifested in early April. Faint tremors rattled the fine china in affluent dining rooms, and a faint, sulphurous odor began to taint the ocean breeze. Silverware mysteriously tarnished overnight, an invisible chemical reaction hinting at the noxious gases seeping from the earth. Soon, a fine dusting of gray ash fell like unseasonable snow, coating the vibrant tropical foliage and settling upon the cobblestone streets. It was an unsettling anomaly, yet the local authorities, driven by the economic imperative to keep the harbor open, swiftly dismissed the mounting evidence of impending doom. As the weeks progressed, the mountain's warnings grew increasingly desperate and impossible to ignore. The crater lake at the summit began to boil, sending plumes of steam high into the azure sky. The water turned a sickly, opaque gray, churning with subterranean heat before finally breaching its banks. On May 5th, a torrent of boiling mud and debris violently cascaded down a river valley, obliterating a sugar mill in its path and claiming the first 24 lives. This brutal mudflow was a clear, undeniable demonstration of the volcano's awakening lethality. The destruction of the mill sent a ripple of genuine terror through the populace, shattering the illusion of safety. Panic began to take root as the ashfall thickened, plunging the city into an eerie twilight darkness even during the midday hours. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe, while the continuous deep-throated roars from the summit sounded like heavy artillery fire echoing across the island. Driven by a primal instinct to survive, many rural villagers fled their homes, pouring into the already crowded streets of Saint-Pierre in search of refuge. The creeping dread was compounded by a bizarre and macabre invasion that struck the city in the days following the mudflow. Fleeing the unbearable heat and toxic gases higher up the slopes, thousands of venomous snakes and colossal centipedes descended upon the urban center. The desperate wildlife swarmed through the streets, invading homes and terrorizing the trapped citizens. Dozens of people and domestic animals would die from venomous bites, adding a horrific, almost biblical layer of suffering to the unfolding nightmare. The natural world was screaming a warning, violently abandoning the mountain, yet humanity stubbornly remained. The political climate of Martinique played a fatal role in the impending disaster. A crucial election was scheduled for May 10th, and the conservative governor was determined to ensure that the voters of Saint-Pierre remained in the city to cast their ballots. Fearing that a mass evacuation would hand victory to his political rivals, the administration launched a desperate campaign of reassurance. They deployed troops to the roads leading out of the city, actively turning back those who attempted to flee to the safer southern regions of the island. To further pacify the terrified population, the government published a special edition of the local newspaper, featuring a reassuring report from a hastily assembled scientific commission. The publication confidently declared that the volcanic activity posed no immediate threat, comparing the mountain's rumblings to a harmless steam valve. The governor himself arrived in the city with his wife, a tragic and deeply misguided gesture intended to demonstrate his absolute faith in the mountain's stability. This manufactured calm convinced thousands of anxious souls to unpack their bags and stay, trusting the authorities who were leading them to the slaughter. The night of May 7th descended with a suffocating, oppressive weight. The ash was now falling so thickly that the glow of the gas lamps barely penetrated the gloom, casting long, distorted shadows across the anxious faces of the citizens. The mountain thundered relentlessly, lightning flashing within the towering ash plume above, illuminating the sky with a demonic crimson glow. Inside the homes and taverns, families huddled together, praying for deliverance, trapped between the violent wrath of the volcano and the invisible, unyielding walls of political decree. The city of Saint-Pierre held its breath, waiting for a dawn that would never truly arrive. Ascension Day, Thursday, May 8, 1902, broke with a deceptive, terrifying silence. Shortly before 8 in the morning, a telegraph operator in Saint-Pierre transmitted a brief message to a neighboring town, simply stating to go. It was the last word the city would ever speak. At exactly 2 minutes past 8, the side of Mount Pelée violently blew out, unleashing a cataclysmic force that defied human comprehension. It was not a slow, creeping flow of lava, but a sudden, unimaginable explosion of superheated gas, ash, and pulverized rock. This monstrous phenomenon, known as a pyroclastic flow, hugged the contours of the earth as it raced down the mountain at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. A glowing avalanche of death, its internal temperature soared to an unfathomable 1,000 degrees Celsius. The cloud was utterly silent as it descended, moving faster than the speed of sound, outrunning the very roar of the eruption that birthed it. It was an unstoppable wall of incandescent fury, obliterating the lush tropical landscape in a fraction of a second and turning the vibrant green slopes into an instant wasteland. In less than 3 minutes, the pyroclastic flow struck Saint-Pierre with the force of an atomic blast. The impact was absolute and merciless. Buildings crafted from thick stone were pulverized, their heavy walls sheared off at their foundations. Statues weighing tons were thrown across plazas like discarded toys. The intense, unimaginable heat caused the rum barrels in the distilleries to explode, adding violent firestorms to the choking, suffocating cloud of ash. The harbor, filled with ships that had been unable or unwilling to leave, became a boiling cauldron of destruction. For the inhabitants of the city, the end came with terrifying, merciful swiftness. The superheated gases seared the lungs of anyone who drew a breath, asphyxiating them before the physical impact of the debris even reached their bodies. People were frozen in time, sitting at their breakfast tables, walking in the streets, or huddled in the cathedral for morning mass. In the span of a few heartbeats, nearly 30,000 souls would die instantly. The Paris of the West Indies was erased from existence, replaced by a smoldering, silent expanse of gray desolation. The sheer scale of the devastation was impossible to grasp for the rescue ships that cautiously approached the burning shoreline hours later. The once bustling harbor was choked with the charred, sinking remains of merchant vessels. The vibrant city had been reduced to a monochrome landscape of smoking ruins, devoid of any movement or sound, save for the crackling of lingering fires and the howling of the wind. The rescuers found no wounded to treat. No survivors clinging to the wreckage. The lethal efficiency of the cloud had ensured that there was no middle ground between life and death. The disaster sent shockwaves around the globe, forever altering the scientific understanding of eruptions. Prior to this event, geologists had primarily studied relatively slow-moving lava flows. The terrifying reality of a fast-moving, superheated density current forced a radical reevaluation of hazardous peaks. The destruction of Saint-Pierre became a grim textbook case, a somber baseline for the destructive potential of the Earth's internal fires, proving that a mountain did not need to bury a city in lava to completely annihilate it. Yet, from the ashes of this unprecedented human tragedy, an impossible story of survival emerged, defying all logic and reason. 4 days after the eruption, rescue workers carefully navigating the still smoldering ruins heard faint, desperate cries emanating from the rubble of the city's prison. Digging through the debris, they uncovered a partially buried subterranean dungeon. Inside this dark, suffocating cell, they found a man clinging to life, severely burned and starving, but breathing. His name was Ludger Sylbaris, a young laborer who had been locked away for a drunken brawl just a day before the mountain exploded. The architecture of his confinement was the very thing that saved him from the inferno. The solitary confinement cell was built partially underground, with incredibly thick stone walls and no windows, only a narrow grating in the heavy door facing away from the volcano. When the pyroclastic flow engulfed the prison, the superheated ash and gas blasted through the grating. Sylbaris survived by urinating on his clothing and stuffing the wet fabric into the narrow opening, desperately shielding his face from the searing heat that filled his tiny, dark tomb. For 4 agonizing days, he lay in absolute darkness, enduring agonizing burns as the ambient temperature in the cell spiked to oven-like extremes. He had no food, no water, and no understanding of the apocalypse that had occurred just beyond his heavy iron door. He only knew that the world outside had suddenly turned to fire, followed by an endless, suffocating silence. His survival was an extraordinary anomaly, a cruel irony where the punishment of incarceration provided the only sanctuary from a disaster that claimed the lives of the free citizens above. Ludger Sylbaris emerged from the ruins as a living ghost, the sole known survivor of the city proper. His story captivated the world, transforming him from a forgotten prisoner into a morbid celebrity. He was eventually pardoned for his crimes and spent the remainder of his life touring with a traveling circus, billed as the man who lived through doomsday. Yet beneath the spectacle, he carried the physical and psychological scars of a man who had witnessed the end of his world, a solitary witness to the sudden, violent erasure of an entire society. History examines the tragedy of Saint-Pierre not merely as a geological phenomenon, but as a profound indictment of human arrogance and political expediency. The loss of life was not entirely an act of an unpredictable nature, but the devastating result of ignored warnings and calculated deception. The authorities possessed the information needed to save the population, but they prioritized economic stability and political power over human life. They gambled with the lives of thousands, relying on flawed assumptions and a desperate hope that the earth would simply quiet down. The Scientific Commission's reassuring report, published just a day before the catastrophe, stands as a chilling historical artifact. It is a testament to the danger of authoritative complacency, illustrating how experts can fatally misinterpret data when pressured by political masters. The governor's refusal to order an evacuation and his active efforts to prevent people from leaving transformed a natural hazard into a monumental human catastrophe. The blood of the city was on the hands of those who chose to silence the mountain's warnings. In the decades that followed, the ruins were slowly reclaimed by the relentless tropical jungle. A new, much smaller town was eventually built among the shattered foundations, but it never regained the glory or the population of the Paris of the West Indies. The city remains a quiet, haunting memorial, its preserved ruins serving as a stark reminder of the devastating power of the earth and the fragile nature of human existence. The shattered walls of the theater and the empty echoing shell of the cathedral stand as silent witnesses to the day the sky turned to fire. Even today, the shadow of Mount Pelée commands a deep, enduring respect from the inhabitants of Martinique. The mountain is heavily monitored, its every tremor and sigh recorded by modern instruments, ensuring that the deadly surprise of 1902 can never be repeated. Yet, the memory of that day lingers in the cultural consciousness, a dark mythos woven into the history of the island. The stories of the boiling lake, the invading serpents, and the silent, deadly cloud are passed down through generations, a chilling folklore grounded in terrifying reality. The horrifying volcanic destruction remains one of the deadliest events in recorded history. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that our civilizations, no matter how advanced or prosperous, exist at the mercy of the planet's deeper, ancient forces. The tragic fate of the city underscores the critical importance of heeding the warnings of the natural world, rather than attempting to bend them to our political or economic will. It is a lesson written in ash and stone, paid for with the lives of an entire community, as the wind whistles through the stone ruins of the old city. It carries the faint, lingering echoes of a forgotten era. It whispers of a vibrant metropolis erased in a single fiery breath, and of the profound silence that followed the roar of the mountain. The story of Saint-Pierre is a chilling chapter in the human saga, a haunting reminder that beneath our feet lies a power capable of unmaking everything we have built, waiting patiently in the dark.